Some moments slice through time like a blade through silk. They arrive without warning, transforming ordinary Tuesday afternoons into memories that will haunt you forever. Detective Sarah Mitchell thought she had seen it all in her 15 years on the force. Drug busts, domestic violence calls, gang shootings. The dark symphony of urban crime had played its familiar tune in her ears countless times. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for what she would discover in the abandoned warehouse on Maple Street that cold February evening. Nothing could have warned her that the woman standing in that blood-stained room would turn her entire understanding of justice, family, and survival completely upside down. This is not just another crime story. This is the story of how one desperate mother's impossible choice would expose a web of corruption so deep, so twisted, that would shake the very foundations of a small town's trust. It's the story of how sometimes the person who pulls the trigger isn't the real killer at all. And it's the story of how the truth, when it finally emerges from the shadows, can be more shocking than any lie ever told. The call came in at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. Detective Sarah Mitchell was finishing her paperwork when dispatch crackled through the radio. Shots fired at the old Morrison warehouse on Maple Street. Units responding, detective requested on scene. Sarah grabbed her coat and badge, her mind already shifting into investigation mode. The Morrison warehouse had been empty for 3 years, ever since the textile company shut down and moved operations overseas. It was the kind of place that attracted trouble, homeless camps, drug deals, and kids looking for somewhere to cause mischief away from prying eyes. The drive across town took 12 minutes through the early evening traffic. As Sarah pulled up to the scene, she counted 4 patrol cars already there, their red and blue lights painting the gray February sky in urgent colors. Officer Martinez approached her car as she stepped out. "What do we have?" Sarah asked, pulling on her latex gloves. Anonymous tip came in about 20 minutes ago. Caller said they heard gunshots from inside the building. First units on scene found the front door wide open. "There's a body inside, detective." Sarah nodded grimly. "Witnesses?" "None so far." The caller hung up before we could get location. Phone number traced to a burner cell. They walked toward the warehouse together, their footsteps echoing off the wet pavement. The building loomed ahead of them, its broken windows like dark eyes staring down at the gathering crowd of police officers and crime scene technicians. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of shadows and dust. Industrial equipment stood covered in tarps, looking like sleeping giants in the dim light filtering through the dirty windows. The air smelled of rust, mold, and something else, something metallic and fresh that made Sarah's stomach tighten. "Over here, detective," called Officer Johnson from somewhere deeper in the building. Sarah followed the voice through the maze of equipment until she found herself in what used to be the main production floor. A large open space with concrete floors and high ceilings supported by steel beams. And there in the center of the space was the body. Marcus Chun, 34 years old, according to the wallet found in his back pocket, lay face down in a pool of blood that was still spreading slowly across the concrete. 3 gunshot wounds were visible, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. The execution-style positioning told Sarah this wasn't a robbery gone wrong or a crime of passion. This was deliberate, calculated murder. "Any idea how long he's been here?" Sarah asked the medical examiner who was already on scene. "Based on the blood pooling and body temperature, I'd say no more than an hour. Probably less." Sarah walked slowly around the perimeter of the scene, her trained eyes taking in every detail. Shell casings glinted in the artificial light set up by the crime scene team. 3 brass casings, all from a 9mm handgun, scattered about 6 feet from the body. The killer had stood over Marcus Chun and fired down at him, then walked away without bothering to pick up the evidence. "Detective Mitchell," Officer Martinez called from near the entrance. "You need to see this." Sarah made her way back through the warehouse to find Martinez standing next to a small office that had been built into one corner of the main floor. The door was ajar, and through the opening, Sarah could see that someone had been inside recently. A folding chair sat in the middle of the small space, and on the floor beside it was a purse, expensive leather, the kind that cost more than most people made in a week. "Anyone touch this?" Sarah asked. "No, ma'am. Found it exactly like this." Sarah carefully opened the purse, using a pen to avoid contaminating any potential fingerprints. Inside was a wallet containing a driver's license, credit cards, and about $300 in cash. The license photo showed an attractive woman in her early 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and kind eyes. The name on the license read Elena Rodriguez, with an address in the wealthy Hillcrest neighborhood across town. "Run this name," Sarah told Martinez. "I want to know everything about Elena Rodriguez. Employment, family, criminal history, parking tickets, everything." As the crime scene team continued their methodical work, Sarah stepped outside to think. The February air was crisp and clean compared to the stale atmosphere inside the warehouse. She pulled out her phone and called Lieutenant Barnes back at the station. "We've got a professional hit," she reported. "Marcus Chun, early 30s, 3 gunshots execution style. Found a purse at the scene belonging to someone named Elena Rodriguez. I need you to start digging into any connection between these two people." "Copy that. What's your next move?" "I'm heading to the Rodriguez address. If she's our shooter, she's had less than an hour head start. If she's another victim, we need to find her before the killer does." The drive to Hillcrest took Sarah through 3 distinct neighborhoods, each more affluent than the last. By the time she reached Maple Ridge Drive, the modest apartment buildings and convenience stores had given way to tree-lined streets and houses that cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Number 1247, Maple Ridge Drive was a 2-story colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn and a circular driveway. A silver BMW sat in the driveway, and lights were on in several windows. Sarah parked on the street and approached the front door cautiously, her hand resting on her service weapon. The doorbell played an elaborate melody that echoed through the house. Footsteps approached from inside, and Sarah heard the sound of multiple locks being undone. The door opened to reveal a man in his 50s, well-dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice carrying the slight accent of someone who had learned English as a second language. "I'm Detective Mitchell with the city police," Sarah said, showing her badge. "I'm looking for Elena Rodriguez. Is she available to speak with me?" The man's face immediately changed, worry lines appearing around his eyes. "Elena? What's wrong? Has something happened?" "And you are?" "Roberto Rodriguez. Elena is my wife. Please, what's going on?" Sarah studied his face carefully. The concern appeared genuine, but 15 years of police work had taught her that anyone could be a good actor when their freedom was on the line. "Mr. Rodriguez, I need to speak with your wife about an incident that occurred earlier this evening." "Is she home?" "She's upstairs resting. She's been feeling unwell today." "Detective, you're scaring me. What kind of incident?" "A man named Marcus Chun was found dead tonight. Your wife's purse was found at the scene." Roberto Rodriguez staggered backward as if Sarah had physically struck him. His face went pale, and he gripped the doorframe to steady himself. "Marcus Chun," he whispered. "Oh my God, Elena." Before Sarah could stop him, Roberto turned and ran toward the staircase, calling his wife's name. Sarah followed, her hand moving to her weapon as she climbed the stairs. At the top, Roberto pushed open a bedroom door, and Sarah heard him gasp. The bedroom was empty, but it looked like it had been ransacked. Dresser drawers were pulled open, clothes scattered on the floor, and the closet door stood wide, revealing empty hangers. On the bed was a single piece of paper, folded in half. Roberto picked up the paper with shaking hands and read it, his face crumpling as he took in the words. He sank down onto the bed, the note fluttering to the floor. Sarah picked up the note and read, "Roberto, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. By the time you read this, it will all be over. Please forgive me. Take care of Sophia. All my love, Elena." "Mr. Rodriguez," Sarah said gently, "I need you to tell me about Marcus Chun. How did your wife know him?" Roberto looked up at her with eyes full of pain and confusion. Marcus was Elena's business partner. They ran an import company together. But, Detective, Elena would never hurt anyone. She's the kindest person I've ever known. There has to be some mistake. When did you last see your wife? This morning. She said she wasn't feeling well and was going to stay home from work. When I left from my office around 8:30, she was still in bed. I tried calling her this afternoon, but she didn't answer. I thought she was sleeping. Sarah's radio crackled. Detective Mitchell, we need you back at the scene. We found something. Mr. Rodriguez, I need you to come with me to the station. We need to talk more about your wife and Marcus Chun. The ride back to the warehouse was tense, with Roberto sitting silently in the passenger seat, staring out the window as if he might see his wife walking along the sidewalk. When they arrived, the crime scene was still bustling with activity, but now there was an additional sense of urgency in the air. Officer Martinez met them at the entrance. Detective, we found a second crime scene. There's a storage room in the back of the building. It looks like someone was held there against their will. Sarah left Roberto with another officer and followed Martinez deeper into the warehouse, past the main production floor, through a narrow hallway lined with defunct machinery, to a small storage room that Sarah hadn't noticed during her initial walkthrough. The room was windowless and had been fitted with a heavy wooden door that showed signs of forced entry. Inside, Sarah found evidence that someone had been imprisoned there, rope tied to a support beam, an overturned chair, and, most disturbing of all, bloodstains on the concrete floor that appeared different from the blood found with Marcus Chen's body. This blood is older, the medical examiner confirmed. Maybe 2 or 3 days, based on the color and the way it's dried. So someone was held here for days before Marcus Chun was killed, Sarah mused. The question is who and why. Officer Johnson approached with a small plastic bag. Detective, we found this wedge between 2 pieces of equipment near the storage room. Inside the bag was a cell phone, an older model flip phone that looked like it had been dropped and kicked across the floor. Sarah turned it on and scrolled through the recent calls. The last number dialed was to 911, and the timestamp showed 6:25 p.m., just 22 minutes before the first police units arrived at the scene. Our anonymous tipster, Sarah realized. Whoever was held in that storage room managed to escape and call for help. She continued scrolling through the phone and found text messages that made her blood run cold. The messages were from a number she didn't recognize, but the content was clear enough. We have your daughter. You do exactly what we say, or she dies. Meet Marcus at the warehouse at 6 p.m. Come alone. Bring the money. Any tricks, and the girl pays the price. We'll be watching. The final message was time-stamped at 5:58 p.m. Your daughter is in the storage room. You have 2 minutes to decide. Kill Marcus or watch her die. Sarah looked up from a phone to find Roberto Rodriguez standing in the doorway, his face white with terror. Detective, he whispered, we need to find Sophia, Elena's daughter from her first marriage. She was supposed to be at school today, but when I called to check on her after you left the house, they said she never showed up. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but the picture they were forming was more complex and horrifying than Sarah had initially imagined. Elena Rodriguez hadn't committed murder in cold blood. She had been forced to choose between killing a man and watching her daughter die. And now both Elena and Sophia were missing, somewhere out there in the night with killers who had already proven they were willing to use a child as leverage to force a mother into murder. The question that remained was whether Elena had managed to save her daughter, or whether the people who had orchestrated this nightmare had decided to eliminate all the witnesses. As Sarah coordinated with other units to begin searching for Elena and Sophia Rodriguez, she couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus Chen's murder was just the beginning. Someone had gone to elaborate lengths to force Elena into pulling that trigger, and people who planned this carefully rarely left loose ends alive. The clock was ticking, and somewhere in the city, a mother and daughter were running for their lives from people who had already demonstrated they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Sarah just hoped she could find them before it was too late. The police station buzzed with activity at 8:30 that night as Detective Sarah Mitchell coordinated the search for Elena and Sofia Rodriguez. Roberto sat in the interview room, nursing his third cup of coffee and answering questions about his wife's business dealings with Marcus Chen. Every few minutes, he would ask if there was any news about Sofia, and each time Sarah had to shake her head. "Tell me more about the import business," Sarah said, sliding a fresh notepad across the table. "What exactly did Elena and Marcus import?" Roberto rubbed his temples, looking exhausted. "High-end textiles mainly. Silk from China, cotton from Egypt, some specialty fabrics from South America. Elena had contact from her previous job at an international trading firm. Marcus had the business connections here in the States." "How long had they been partners?" "About 2 years. The business was doing well, better than we expected. Elena was talking about expanding, maybe opening a second location." Roberto's voice cracked slightly. She was so excited about the future. "Detective, I still can't believe she would kill anyone, even to save Sofia." Sarah's phone buzzed. A text message from Officer Martinez found Elena's BMW abandoned at Metro Mall parking lot. K9 unit on scene. "Mr. Rodriguez, we found your wife's car. I need you to stay here while we process the scene. Is there anywhere Elena might take Sofia if she was scared? Anywhere she felt safe?" Roberto thought for a moment. "Her sister Maria lives about an hour north in Riverside. They're very close. Elena also has a friend from college, Janet Murphy, who lives downtown. But, detective, if those people are still after them, we'll check both locations. In the meantime, I need you to think about enemies. Did Elena or Marcus have any problems with suppliers, customers, anyone who might want to hurt them?" Elena never mentioned anything like that. The business world can be competitive, but nothing that would lead to... Roberto gestured helplessly. "This is insane. Who would kidnap a child to force someone to commit murder?" That was the question that had been bothering Sarah all evening. This wasn't a crime of passion or a robbery gone wrong. Someone had planned this elaborate scheme to force Elena Rodriguez to kill Marcus Chun, which meant Marcus's death was the goal all along. The question was why. Sarah left Roberto with another officer and drove to Metro Mall, where crime scene technicians were processing Elena's BMW. The car had been parked in a far corner of the lot, away from the main shopping areas where security cameras might have captured whoever abandoned it there. "Anything useful?" Sarah asked the lead technician. "Vehicle's clean, except for some blood on the driver's seat. Not much, maybe from small cut or scratch. No signs of a struggle inside the car. Keys were left in the ignition." Sarah looked around the parking lot, trying to think like someone running for their lives. The mall was busy even on a Tuesday evening, which would provide good cover for someone trying to disappear into a crowd. But Elena had been driving, which meant she and Sofia had made it out of the warehouse alive and had time to switch transportation. "Detective Mitchell." Officer Johnson approached with a mall security guard. "This is Mr. Peterson from mall security. He might have some information." Peterson was a heavy-set man in his 60s with kind eyes and a concerned expression. "I saw the woman and the girl about an hour ago. They came running into the mall from the parking lot. The woman kept looking over her shoulder like someone was following them." "Can you describe them?" "Hispanic woman, maybe 5'6", brown hair. She had blood on her hands and her shirt was torn. The girl was maybe 12 or 13, very scared. The woman bought them both new clothes from the department store and they changed in the restroom." "Did you see where they went after that?" "They walked toward the food court, but I lost sight of them in the crowd. I probably wouldn't have remembered except the woman looked so terrified. You could tell something bad had happened." Sarah thanked Peterson and called Lieutenant Barnes. Elena and Sofia made it out of the warehouse alive and switched clothes at the mall. They're smart enough to know they need to stay hidden, but they're also scared and running blind. Put out an APB, but make sure all units know they're victims, not suspects. "Copy that. What's your next move?" "I'm going to dig deeper into Marcus Chen's background. Someone wanted him dead badly enough to orchestrate an elaborate kidnapping and murder scheme. I need to find out why." Back at the station, Sarah spread Marcus Chen's personal effects across her desk and began the methodical process of reconstructing his life. His wallet contained the usual items: credit cards, driver's license, insurance cards, and a business card for Chun and Rodriguez Imports. But tucked behind his credit cards was something interesting, a small piece of paper with a phone number written in pencil. Sarah dialed the number. It rang twice before being answered by a man with a deep voice and what sounded like a slight Eastern European accent. Yes, this is Detective Mitchell with the city police. I'm calling about Marcus Chun. There was a long pause. I do not know this name. The number was found in his wallet. Are you sure you don't know Marcus Chun? Another pause, longer this time. Many people have my number, Detective. I run a legitimate business. I do not keep track of every person who calls. What kind of business? The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone for a moment, then called the department's tech specialist. I need you to trace a number for me, she said, reading off the digits from Marcus's paper. And I need it fast. While waiting for the trace results, Sarah pulled up Marcus Chun's financial records. Bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns, all the mundane details that could reveal the hidden patterns of a person's life. What she found was troubling. For the past 6 months, Marcus had been making large cash deposits into his business account. $50,000 here, $30,000 there, amounts that seemed inconsistent with the normal operations of a textile import company. The deposits were always cash, always in round numbers, and always accompanied by vague notations like consulting fee or special project payment. Detective, the tech specialist called from across the room. That number you want it traced? It's registered to a company called Baltic Holdings, but the address is a mail drop box. The phone pings to cell towers all over the city, never stays in one place for more than a few hours. Professional criminals, Sarah muttered. They're using burner phones and fake addresses. Her phone rang. Lieutenant Barnes. Sarah, we got a break. Patrol unit found the Rodriguez woman and her daughter at a bus station downtown. They're bringing them in now. 20 minutes later, Sarah watched through one-way glass as Elena Rodriguez was brought into the interview room. She was a small woman, maybe 5'5", with shoulder-length brown hair and dark eyes that looked haunted by what she had experienced. Her hands were bandaged, and there was a small cut on her forehead that had been treated by the paramedics. Sofia Rodriguez sat beside her mother, a girl of about 13 with Elena's dark eyes and a maturity that seemed far beyond her years. She held her mother's hand tightly and kept glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to burst through it. Sarah entered the room and sat across from them. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Detective Mitchell. First, I want you to know that you and Sophia are safe now. Second, I need to understand what happened at that warehouse. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. They took my baby. They said they would kill her if I didn't do what they wanted. Who took her? Did you see their faces? 2 men. They grabbed Sophia when she was walking to school 3 days ago. They called me and said if I went to the police or didn't follow their instructions exactly, they would hurt her. Sophia spoke for the first time, her young voice steady despite everything she had been through. They kept me in that cold room. They gave me water, but no food for 2 days. They said my mom had to do something for them, and then they would let me go. Sarah felt a surge of anger at the monsters who would use a child this way, but she forced herself to remain calm and professional. Elena, I need you to tell me everything. From the beginning. Elena took a shaky breath. It started about 6 months ago. Marcus came to me with an opportunity to make extra money. He said he had clients who needed special shipments brought in from overseas, things that required discretion. What kind of things? I thought it was just high-end merchandise that wealthy people didn't want to pay full import taxes on. Marcus said it was common in the import business, that everyone did it. Sarah nodded. She was beginning to see the picture. But it wasn't luxury goods, was it? At first, maybe it was. The containers we were bringing in seemed to have the right weight and dimensions for textiles. But then the payments got bigger and the clients got stranger. Men who wouldn't give their real names, who paid entirely in cash, who wanted their deliveries made at night to warehouses instead of retail stores. Did you ever see what was actually in the containers? Elena shook her head. Marcus handled all of that. He said it was better if I didn't know the details for legal reasons. I was just the front person, the one with the clean record and the legitimate business connections. Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. Tell her about the scary man. Elena's face went pale. 2 weeks ago, a man came to our house. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with blonde hair and scars on his hands. He said there had been a problem with one of our shipments, that some merchandise had gone missing. What kind of problem? He said someone had stolen from them, and they believed Marcus was involved. He wanted me to help them prove it. Sarah leaned forward. Help them how? He wanted me to search Marcus's office, to copy files from his computer, to find evidence that Marcus was skimming money or stealing merchandise. He said if I helped them, they would just take their business elsewhere. If I didn't, Elena glanced at Sophia. He said families could be hurt very easily. But you didn't report this to the police. Elena's voice broke. I was scared. These people knew where I lived, where Sophia went to school. And I wasn't completely innocent, detective. I had taken money for shipments without asking too many questions. I thought if I could just help them resolve their dispute with Marcus, it would all go away. What did you find when you searched Marcus's office? Nothing at first. His computer was password protected, and his files were all normal business documents. But then I found a safety deposit box key hidden in his desk drawer. The next day, when Marcus was out meeting clients, I used his key. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What was in the box? Money. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. And documents showing that Marcus had been running a separate business, something completely different from our textile imports. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I made copies before I put everything back. Sarah unfolded the paper and found herself looking at a shipping manifest for a container that had arrived from Eastern Europe 3 weeks earlier. But instead of listing textiles or fabrics, the manifest showed the contents as mechanical parts with a declared value far below what Marcus had been depositing in his business account. Mrs. Rodriguez, I think your husband was smuggling more than just luxury goods. This looks like weapons, possibly drugs, definitely something illegal and dangerous. That's what I realized when I saw the documents. I called the man who had threatened us and told him I'd found evidence that Marcus was stealing from him. I thought that would be the end of it. Sophia looked at her mother with tears in her eyes. But they took me anyway. Elena nodded, her own tears starting to fall. The next morning, Sophia didn't come home from school. They called me and said I had to choose. Either I killed Marcus myself, or they would kill Sophia and make it look like an accident. Why did they want Marcus dead instead of just confronting him themselves? The man said Marcus knew too much about their organization. If he was arrested, he might make a deal with the police and give them information about other operations. They needed him dead, and they needed it to look like a crime of passion or a business dispute, not a professional hit. Sarah sat back in her chair, processing the implications. Elena Rodriguez had been manipulated into committing murder by an international smuggling operation that was using her import business as a front. Marcus Chun had been stealing from dangerous criminals who decided to eliminate him while simultaneously destroying Elena's life as punishment for getting involved. The warehouse, Sarah said. How did you know where to find Sophia? They told me she would be in the storage room, but only after I killed Marcus. They said I had to shoot him first. Then they would tell me where my daughter was. I didn't know if I could trust them, but what choice did I have? Sophia looked at her mother with a mixture of love and terror. When I heard the gunshots, I was so scared. But then Mom found me and got me out of those ropes. She saved me. Elena wiped her tears. We ran to my car and drove away as fast as we could. I knew the police would be coming soon, and I knew how it would look. A woman's purse at a murder scene, her fingerprints on the gun. I thought they would arrest me, and Sophia would be left alone with no one to protect her from those men. The gun, Sarah realized. You left the murder weapon at the scene? Elena nodded. They made me bring my own gun. Roberto bought it for me last year after there were some break-ins in our neighborhood. They said it had to be traceable to me to make sure I couldn't claim someone else was responsible. Sarah's radio crackled. Detective Mitchell, we need you in the lab. We've got results on the ballistics and fingerprints from the Chun murder scene. Sarah stood up. Elena, Sophia, I need you both to stay here. You're not under arrest, but I need to verify your story before I can guarantee your safety. There are dangerous people involved in this, and until we catch them, you're both still in danger. In the forensics lab, the ballistics expert confirmed what Sarah already suspected. The bullets that killed Marcus Chun were fired from Elena's register handgun, and Elena's fingerprints were the only ones found on the weapon. But there was something else. Detective, look at this, the expert said, pointing to a computer screen showing magnified images of the gun. These scratches on the grip are fresh, maybe hours old. It looks like someone forced the gun into someone else's hand. Meaning whoever made Mrs. Rodriguez pull that trigger physically guided her hand. You could see the pressure marks where fingers gripped hers, forcing her to hold the weapon properly. Sarah felt sick. Elena had been physically forced to murder Marcus Chun while her daughter's life hung in the balance. This wasn't just coercion. It was torture designed to destroy two innocent lives while eliminating a business problem. Her phone rang. Lieutenant Barnes again. Sarah, we got a problem. Roberto Rodriguez is missing from the station. The officer watching him said he went to the bathroom 20 minutes ago and never came back. We found a bathroom window open. Sarah's blood ran cold. If the same people who had kidnapped Sophia were now after Roberto, it meant they weren't finished cleaning up loose ends. Elena's husband might already be dead, or worse. He might be the next leverage they would use to force Elena into doing something even more terrible. Racing back to the interview room, Sarah found Elena and Sophia exactly where she had left them, but now they both looked terrified again. Detective, Elena said, standing up as Sarah entered. Roberto called my cell phone 5 minutes ago. They have him. Sophia was crying now. The same voice as before. The scary man who took me. Sarah sat down heavily. What did he say? Elena's voice was barely audible. He said killing Marcus was just the beginning. He said there are other people who know too much about their business, and I'm going to help them eliminate the problem. If I don't do exactly what they say, they'll kill Roberto the same way they would have killed Sophia. Elena, these people are never going to let you go. Every time you do what they want, they'll just demand something worse. We need to catch them, and we need to do it tonight. How? They seem to know everything we're doing before we do it. Sarah thought about the phone trace, the abandoned car, the way the criminals seemed to stay one step ahead of the investigation. Elena, besides you and Roberto, who else knew about Marcus's business dealings? Elena thought for a moment. His lawyer, maybe. His accountant. There was also a woman he worked with sometimes, someone who helped coordinate the overseas shipments. What was her name? Janet Murphy. She used to work for the same international trading firm where I met Marcus. Sarah felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. Janet Murphy was the same person Roberto had mentioned as one of Elena's close friends. The same Janet Murphy who would have known about Elena's schedule, her family, her vulnerabilities. Elena, I need you to call Janet Murphy. Tell her you're scared and need help. Tell her you want to meet somewhere safe. Can you do that? Elena nodded, though her hands were shaking. You think she's involved with those men? I think she might be how they've been staying ahead of us. If I'm right, she's been feeding them information from the beginning. As Elena dialed Janet Murphy's number, Sarah coordinated with tactical units to prepare for what she hoped would be the final confrontation of the night. But she knew that for Elena and Sophia Rodriguez, the nightmare was far from over. Even if they caught the people responsible for Marcus Chen's murder, Elena had still been forced to pull the trigger. The legal and emotional consequences of that moment would follow them for the rest of their lives. The phone call was brief. Janet Murphy agreed to meet Elena at an all-night diner across town, a public place where Elena would supposedly feel safe. As Sarah prepared to leave with Elena for what she hoped would be a trap, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into an ambush carefully planned by people who had been orchestrating this entire nightmare from the very beginning. The Moonlight Diner sat on the corner of 5th and Main like a beacon in the darkness, its neon sign casting pink and blue shadows across the wet pavement. At 10:30 on that Tuesday night, it was nearly empty except for a few late shift workers grabbing coffee and a homeless man nursing a cup of soup in the corner booth. Detective Sarah Mitchell sat in an unmarked van across the street, watching Elena Rodriguez through night vision binoculars as she entered the diner. Elena looked small and vulnerable as she slid into a booth near the window, constantly glancing around as if expecting danger to materialize from the shadows. Sophia remained at the police station under protective custody, and Sarah had positioned tactical units at strategic points around the diner. If Janet Murphy was indeed working with the criminals who had destroyed the Rodriguez family, tonight would be the end of it. Subject entering the diner now, Officer Martinez's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece. White female, approximately 45 years old, matching the description Elena provided. Sarah watched through her binoculars as Janet Murphy approached Elena's booth. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the tension in Elena's posture as she stood to greet her supposed friend. The two women embraced briefly before sitting across from each other. "Audio check," Sarah whispered into her radio. "Copy that, detective. We're picking up clear audio from Elena's wire." Elena's voice came through Sarah's earpiece, thin and scared but steady. "Janet, thank God you're here. I don't know what to do." "Elena, honey, what's going on? You sounded terrified on the phone. Something terrible has happened. Marcus is dead, and these men are threatening my family. They took Sophia. They forced me to—" Elena's voice broke, just as they had rehearsed. Sarah watched Janet Murphy's reaction carefully through the binoculars. The woman reached across the table to take Elena's hands, her face a picture of concern and sympathy. If she was acting, she was very good at it. "Elena, you need to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. It's connected to the business, to the imports Marcus and I were handling. I think we were being used to smuggle something, and when Marcus tried to back out or skim money, they killed him." "Who killed him, Elena?" "I don't know their names. Foreign men? Maybe Russian or Eastern European. They said Marcus knew too much about their operations." Sarah saw Janet Murphy tense slightly at the mention of Eastern Europeans. It was subtle, but it was there, a moment of recognition that confirmed Sarah's suspicions. "Elena," Janet said carefully, "did these men say anything about other people being involved? Anyone else who might be in danger?" "They mentioned something about cleaning up loose ends." "Janet, I'm scared they might come after you too. Marcus said you helped coordinate some of the overseas shipments." "I helped with paperwork, nothing more." "Elena, where are you staying? Are you and Sophia somewhere safe?" Elena had been coached for this moment. "We're at a hotel downtown. The police wanted us to go into protective custody, but I don't trust them. How do I know they're not working with these criminals too?" Janet nodded sympathetically. "You're right to be careful. Look, I have a friend who runs a safe house for people in witness protection. It's completely off the books, totally secure. I can make a call. You would do that for me?" "Of course. We're friends, Elena. Let me make the call right now." Sarah watched as Janet Murphy pulled out her cell phone and dialed a number. Through the audio feed, Sarah could hear both sides of the conversation. "It's me," Janet said into the phone. "I need to pick up at the Moonlight Diner. One package, possibly two." "Yes, tonight." The voice on the other end of the phone was male with a slight accent. "Is she cooperative?" "She will be. She's scared and doesn't trust the police. I told her about the safe house." "Good. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Make sure she doesn't leave." Janet ended the call and smiled at Elena. "They're sending someone to pick you up. You'll be completely safe, I promise." Elena nodded gratefully, but Sarah could hear the fear in her voice as she spoke into the wire. "Janet, can I ask you something? How'd you know I would be at home when you call me back? I never told you I was staying at a hotel." There was a pause. Janet's face went still for just a moment before she recovered. "I didn't know, honey. I just tried your home number first, then your cell when no one answered. But you called my cell phone directly. You didn't call the house." Sarah saw Janet Murphy's expression change, the mask of friendship slipping away to reveal something cold and calculating underneath. "Elena, I think you're confused. You've been through a traumatic experience." "No," Elena said, her voice getting stronger. "I remember exactly what happened. You knew I wasn't at home because you knew Sophia had been kidnapped. You knew because you helped them take her. Janet started to stand up. Elena, you're being paranoid. I'm trying to help you. The safe house isn't for protection, is it? It's where they're going to kill me, just like they killed Marcus. Sarah spoke into her radio. Move in now. All units. Target is attempting to flee. Through the diner windows, Sarah could see Janet Murphy grabbing her purse and heading for the exit. Elena remained in the booth, following instructions to stay put and let the police handle the arrest. But as Sarah climbed out of the van, she saw something that made her blood freeze. A black SUV with tinted windows was pulling up to the diner's side entrance, and two men were getting out. Both were tall and muscular, and both were reaching inside their jackets for what Sarah was certain were weapons. We've got company, Sarah barked into her radio. Two armed suspects approaching the target location. All units, this is now a hostage situation. The first gunshot shattered the diner's front window, sending glass cascading across the sidewalk like deadly rain. Sarah dove behind a parked car as more shots followed, automatic weapons fire that lit up the night and sent civilian vehicles racing away from the scene. Through her earpiece, Sarah could hear Elena screaming and the sound of overturning furniture as everyone in the diner dove for cover. The homeless man in the corner booth was crying out in pain, apparently hit by flying glass or ricochet. Elena, stay down, Sarah called into her radio. We're coming to get you. Detective, Elena's voice came back, panicked but alive. They've got Janet. Two men grab her, and they're dragging her toward the kitchen. Sarah realized what was happening. The criminals weren't here to rescue Janet Murphy. They were here to eliminate her, just like they had eliminated Marcus Chun. Janet had served her purpose by luring Elena into the open, and now she was a liability who knew too much about their operation. Officer Martinez's voice crackled through the radio. Detective, we've got the building surrounded, but they've barricaded themselves in the kitchen area. They're using the diner staff as human shields. Sarah made a decision that would haunt her for years to come. Instead of waiting for backup or calling in a hostage negotiator, she decided to enter the diner through the broken front window. Elena Rodriguez had already been through enough trauma, and Sarah wasn't going to let her watch more innocent people die because of a case that had spiraled completely out of control. The interior of the diner looked like a war zone. Tables were overturned, glass covered the floor, and bullet holes decorated the walls in random patterns. Elena was crouched behind the counter, blood on her face from flying glass, but otherwise unharmed. The elderly cook and a young waitress were huddled together near the coffee machine, both crying but alive. Where are they? Sarah whispered to Elena. Elena pointed toward the kitchen doors. Two men took Janet back there. I heard her screaming, then it got quiet. Sarah drew her service weapon and approached the kitchen doors carefully. Through the small windows, she could see movement and shadows, but no clear targets. She was about to call for the tactical team when she heard a man's voice from inside the kitchen, speaking with a thick Eastern European accent. Detective Mitchell, we know you are out there. Come inside, alone, or we start killing hostages. How many hostages do you have? Sarah called back. 3. The woman who betrayed us and 2 kitchen workers. You have 30 seconds to decide. Sarah looked back at Elena, who was watching her with eyes full of terror and desperate hope. This woman had already been forced to kill one person to save her daughter's life. She didn't deserve to watch more people die because of decisions other people had made. I'm coming in, Sarah called. Don't hurt anyone. She pushed through the kitchen doors with her weapon raised, immediately taking in the scene. 2 men, both tall and blonde with the hard faces of professional criminals, stood on either side of the small kitchen. One held Janet Murphy, who had a gun pressed against her head and tears streaming down her face. The other had his weapon trained on 2 terrified kitchen workers, a middle-aged Hispanic man and a young woman who couldn't have been more than 20. Put down your weapon, the first man ordered. Sarah knew she was outgunned and outmaneuvered, but she also knew that these men had no intention of letting anyone leave the diner alive. They had already proven they were willing to use children as leverage and force innocent people to commit murder. They weren't going to negotiate in good faith. "Let the kitchen workers go," Sarah said, keeping her gun trained on the first man. "Your problem is with Janet, not with them. Our problem, detective, is with everyone who knows about our business. That includes you, the woman out there who killed Marcus, her husband who we collected an hour ago, and the child who can identify us." Sarah felt her heart stop. "You have Roberto Rodriguez?" The second man smiled coldly. "He is safe for now, but his safety depends on your cooperation. What do you want?" "We want you to kill Janet Murphy." The words hung in the air like poison. Sarah stared at the man who had spoken, not quite believing what she had heard. "What did you say?" "You heard me, detective. Take your gun and shoot the woman who has caused us so much trouble. Do this, and we will release the kitchen workers and tell you where to find Roberto Rodriguez." Janet Murphy's eyes went wide with terror as she realized what was happening. "Sarah, please don't do this. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." "Tell that to Marcus Chun," the first man said. "Tell that to the Rodriguez family whose lives you destroyed." Sarah kept her weapon trained on the criminals, but her mind was racing. These men were trying to do to her exactly what they had done to Elena Rodriguez. They were trying to force her to commit murder by threatening innocent lives. "I'm a police officer," Sarah said. "I don't execute people." Then the kitchen workers die first, followed by Roberto Rodriguez, followed by the little girl back at your police station. The threat against Sophia made Sarah's decision for her. But instead of lowering her weapon to point it at Janet Murphy, she dove to the left and squeezed off 3 rapid shots at the first gunman. The kitchen erupted in gunfire and screams. Sarah felt a bullet tear through her shoulder as she rolled behind a stainless steel prep table. But she managed to put 2 bullets in the first gunman's chest before he could fire again. The second gunman was firing wildly, his shots going high as he tried to track Sarah's movement while still controlling his hostages. One of the kitchen workers, the young woman, broke free and ran toward the dining room. The man tried to grab her, but stumbled, giving Sarah the opening she needed. Her third shot caught him in the head, dropping him instantly. The sudden silence in the kitchen was deafening after the explosive violence of the gunfight. Sarah stood up slowly, her wounded shoulder sending waves of pain through her body, and surveyed the scene. Both gunmen were dead. Janet Murphy was alive, but in shock, blood on her face from the first gunman who had been holding her. The male kitchen worker was huddled against the back wall, unhurt but traumatized. "Elena," Sarah called out. "It's over. Call for paramedics." But even as she said the words, Sarah knew it wasn't really over. Roberto Rodriguez was still missing, and these 2 men were probably just foot soldiers in a larger criminal organization. The people at the top, the ones who had orchestrated Marcus Chen's murder and the Rodriguez family's nightmare, were still out there. Janet Murphy was crying as Sarah approached her. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt," she sobbed. "They said it was just business, just moving merchandise. When I found out what Marcus was really doing, I tried to get out, but they threatened my family too." "What was Marcus really doing, Janet?" "He was stealing from them. Not just skimming money, but actual merchandise. Weapons, drugs, I don't know exactly what. But he was selling it to other buyers and keeping the profits." Sarah sat down heavily on a prep table, the adrenaline fading and the pain in her shoulder intensifying. So they decided to eliminate him and make Elena do it to send a message. They said it would destroy her life and serve as a warning to anyone else who might think about betraying them. 2 birds with 1 stone. Elena appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face pale but determined. "Detective, there's something you need to know. Roberto just called. He escaped from the men who were holding him." Sarah looked up hopefully. "Is he safe?" "He's at the hospital. But, detective, he told me something important. The warehouse where they held Sophia, where Marcus was killed. It's owned by Baltic Holdings, the same company that owned the containers Marcus was stealing from." "Meaning what?" Elena's voice was steady as she delivered the final piece of the puzzle. "Meaning this was never about punishing Marcus for stealing. This whole thing was an insurance scam. They needed Marcus dead and their merchandise officially stolen so they could collect on their policies. They used our import business as a cover, then destroyed it to hide the evidence. Sarah stared at Elena, realizing the full scope of what they had uncovered. Marcus Chun hadn't been killed for betraying criminals. He had been killed to help them commit insurance fraud. Elena Rodriguez hadn't been forced to commit murder as punishment. She had been turned into an unwitting accomplice in an elaborate financial crime. Detective Elena continued. Roberto also said he recognized one of the men who grabbed him. It was someone we knew, someone we trusted. Who? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Our lawyer, David Brennan. The man who helped us set up the import business in the first place. He's been working with them from the beginning. As paramedics arrived to treat Sarah's gunshot wound and process the crime scene, she realized that tonight's violence had only scratched the surface of a conspiracy that reached much deeper than anyone had imagined. Elena Rodriguez had been forced to pull the trigger that killed Marcus Chun, but the Real killers were still out there, hiding behind legitimate businesses and legal facades. The question that had started all, who pulled the trigger, had a simple answer. Elena Rodriguez had pulled the trigger. But the more important question was who had loaded the gun, who had put it in her hand, and who had created the circumstances that left her with no choice but to use it. 3 months later, as Sarah sat in a courtroom watching Elena Rodriguez receive a suspended sentence for manslaughter, she reflected on how justice wasn't always about finding the person who committed the crime. Sometimes it was about understanding why the crime was committed and ensuring that the real architects of evil face consequences for their actions. Elena would never fully recover from what she had been forced to do. Sophia would carry the trauma of her kidnapping for the rest of her life. Roberto would always wonder if he could have protected his family better. But David Brennan and the other members of the insurance fraud conspiracy were serving long prison sentences, and their criminal network had been dismantled. Elena Rodriguez had pulled the trigger, but she wasn't the real killer. The Real killers were the people who had destroyed an innocent family's life for money. The people who had turned a mother's love for her child into a weapon. And in the end, justice meant making sure they paid the highest price for their crimes. As Sarah left the courthouse that day, her shoulders still aching from the gunshot wound that would never fully heal, she thought about the moment in the warehouse when Elena Rodriguez had faced the most impossible choice any parent could imagine. Pull the trigger and become a killer, or refuse and watch your child die. In the end, Elena had chosen to save her daughter. Everything else, the legal consequences, the media attention, the sleepless nights filled with nightmares, was a price she had decided she could live with. Because the alternative, a world without Sophia, was a price too high for any mother to pay. The case was closed, but its echoes would reverberate through all their lives forever. Some questions Sarah had learned have answers that change everything you thought you knew about right and wrong, guilt and innocence, justice and survival. And sometimes the person who pulls the trigger isn't the person who fired the shot that really mattered.